Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining me for today's devotion. We've come to the end of another week, and this morning we are in Jeremiah chapter 41, and I hope you are definitely planning to be in Worship Sunday and Life Group Sunday and bringing somebody with you, inviting guests. Get here early and sit down front. Well, I have to tell you, chapter 41 really didn't speak to my heart, devotionally or anything. It was just the story of what happened. And some chapters are like that when you read them sometimes. But having said that, it sets the stage for the next two chapters, which we'll look at next Monday and Tuesday, that really do speak to my heart. And they would not be as powerful if it was not for the history, the story of chapter 41. You'll remember in chapter 40, Jerusalem had fallen, and the Babylonians allowed Jeremiah to go wherever he wanted, so he decided to stay in Judah and Mizpah, the new capital, if you will, because Jerusalem had been destroyed, and they had appointed Gedaliah as governor of the remnant that was behind. And in the latter parts of chapter 40, some of the remnants of the Jewish army that had been scattered throughout the countryside and therefore survived the Babylonian attack on Jerusalem and the major cities eventually made their way to Mizpah, and also some of the Jewish citizens who had escaped to neighboring nations during the war or in the lead up to the war. After the war, they returned to Judah. And so these came together in Mizpah around the governor, Gedaliah. But there was one man, a man named Ishmael, who was a leader in the Jewish military that had survived because he was out in the countryside somewhere. And he came to Gedaliah, but he was actually a traitor, because he was working for the country of Ammon, and he wanted the Ammonites, and would eventually assassinate Gedaliah. And so the story, that's the story. And so chapter 41, if you'll look with me starting at verse 1, in the seventh month, that would be somewhere around October in their calendar, Ishmael, the son of whatever that guy's name is, he was a descendant of David, actually. And it says that he and the chief officers of the king, along with 10 men. So he had a band of ruthless soldiers, himself and 10 others, and they were ruthless. They came to Mizpah, the new capital, which is not far from Jerusalem, to Gedaliah, and they were eating bread together there. It was probably an evening meal. And in verse 2, Ishmael and these 10 men arose and struck down Gedaliah. They killed him and with a sword, and put to death the one whom the king of Babylon had appointed over the land. So in other words, they assassinated Governor Gedaliah. But in verse 3, they also killed the other Jews that were eating dinner with them that night in the room, and they killed the Babylonian soldiers that were in the room, because Babylon had left some of their soldiers. So this is an uprising, and Babylon would have reacted very forcefully to this. And so the following day, Ishmael and his band of soldiers kill several other Jewish men who had been traveling, actually from villages in the old northern kingdom of Israel, who had remained faithful to God through everything that had happened there. They had been coming to Jerusalem, and even though the temple was destroyed, they were on their way to still worship God and participate in a celebration, one of the festivals, if you will, at the site of the temple. Just like Jews today will pray at the Wailing Wall. The temple's gone, but that is a remnant, and they pray there. And so these men from the north had come down to worship God in the midst of the destruction where the temple had once been, and Ishmael and his soldiers kill them and throw all the bodies in a cistern in a well. And then they take some of the other poor people that were there, and they're as captives, as slaves, and they're marching them to Ammon, okay? And word finally reaches the other army officers and soldiers and so on who had survived the Babylonian invasion, the others who had been scattered. They find out what's happened. So they chase down Gedaliah and his men, and they rescue those he had taken captive. They either capture or kill 2 of those 10 men, but Ishmael and 8 of his band of misfits, they escaped to Ammon, if you will. And that's the story. And at the end of the chapter, they're trying to decide, what do we do now? Do we stay here in Judah, or do we go to Egypt? Because they were afraid that even though they were innocent, Ishmael and his ruthless soldiers had killed Gedaliah, the man the Babylonians appointed as governor. They were afraid the Babylonians would just say, we're done with you guys, and would wipe all them out anyway to put an end to all the problems they kept having in Judah. So do we stay here and risk that, or do we go to Egypt? And Monday at the beginning of chapter 2, they asked Jeremiah to pray for guidance, and that's where it starts speaking to our hearts, because there's some powerful lessons in 42 and 43. But you'll notice the last 2 verses of this chapter 41, verses 17 and 18. This is the good soldiers, the ones who had chased Ishmael from the country and rescued those he had taken as captive. Verse 17, and they went and stayed in Geruth near Bethlehem, in order to proceed to Egypt. So in their mind, they're thinking, we're going to go to Egypt because of the Chaldeans. Remember, the Chaldeans, that's another name for the Babylonians. For they were afraid of them, since Ishmael, the son of Nethaniah, had struck down Gedaliah, whom the king of Babylon had appointed over the land. So that's the story. Now, as I said, there's nothing that spoke to me devotionally. Maybe there's a verse in here that spoke to you devotionally. That's okay. That's good. I mean, all of us, sometimes we read a chapter in the Bible or a passage, and we learn, it's good, it feeds us, but it doesn't wow. Other times, so if you got something out of this chapter that spoke to you, praise God. I didn't. It's just the story. But I will tell you, the next 2 chapters really do speak to my heart, and I look forward to sharing that with you on Monday and Tuesday as we look at chapters 42 and 43. You have a great weekend, and be in God's house Sunday. Bring somebody with you and come to Life Group and get here early. God bless you. I'll see you Sunday, and then I'll see you on Monday.